Hi everyone, welcome. Today we are going to begin a book study in Genesis. So of course we're going to start at the beginning in Genesis 1. So today we're going to be reading Genesis 1 to figure out God's intended meaning in Genesis 1 and how we can apply Genesis 1 into our lives. So let's get started. We are going to start off by reading verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now we're going to stop there because believe it or not, there's actually a lot to unpack from this one verse. This verse explains to us that the earth had a beginning. It did not always exist. And the cause of this beginning was God. God created the heavens and the earth. This verse also explains that God created the heavens and the earth, meaning He created the whole universe, not just part of it, not just the heaven, not just the earth, the whole universe. While the earth had a beginning, God did not, because God is eternal. You can see from this one verse that God is already all powerful and eternal because He created the finite earth and He existed before the earth. God did not have a beginning because He always existed. The original language the Bible was written in is Biblical Hebrew, and it's actually interesting because the word for God in Hebrew is Elohim, which is plural. This is already showing God's triune nature. This means that God is three persons, but every verb used with Elohim is singular, also expressing how God is also one being. So God is one being, but three persons. Remember, before the creation of the world, nothing existed except for God at this point. This means God created the whole universe out of nothing. He created the whole universe by just His word and His spirit. This shows the difference between God and finite human beings because God is infinite. He can create something out of nothing, whereas we human beings, we have to rely on materials already made by God to help build stuff. We can't build a house without wood or hammers or anything else. God can create that by just speaking it into existence. The Hebrew word for created in verse 1 is bara, which is exclusively used for divine activity, meaning only God can create this because He can only create stuff out of nothing, unlike us human beings. We are now going to move on to verses 2 and 3, which reads, "The earth was without form and void, and darkness was over the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." This verse describes how the earth is not habitable for human beings yet. God is trying to make it habitable for human beings. He created light because we need light to see and live. The very first thing God did after creating the universe is to try to make it habitable for us human beings. He was thinking about us before we were even created. That's how much He cares about us. These two verses is another reference to the Trinity. When we think of God, we usually think of God the Father. But from these verses, it is clear that God the Father is not the only one creating the universe. God the Spirit and God the Son is also playing a part in creating the universe. We can clearly see God the Spirit working because in verse 2, it specifically says, "And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the water." So obviously, the Holy Spirit was helping God the Father create the universe. Now, the question you might be asking is, how was God the Son helping God the Father and God the Spirit create the earth? Because Jesus' name is not specifically mentioned in these verses. To explain this, I'm going to jump to John 1 through 3 to explain this. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. All things were created through Him, and apart from Him, not one thing was created that has been created. The person who actually wrote the book of John is John the Apostle, who was a disciple of Jesus. So when Jesus started His ministry, John lived 24/7 with Jesus up until Jesus' death. Here we can clearly see that John is referring to Jesus as the Word. He's saying that Jesus was with God, Jesus is God, and the reason the earth was created is because Jesus was working alongside God the Father and God the Spirit to create the whole universe. Now you're wondering, what does this have to do with Genesis 1, 2 through 3? When we think about Jesus, we usually only think about the incarnate Jesus, how He was human on earth. Well, before that, Jesus actually lived with God the Father and God the Spirit. Jesus was pre-existent, meaning He existed before the creation of the universe because, like I said, Jesus is God and God is eternal. So before Jesus was incarnate, He actually dwelled with God the Father, showing that Jesus is also eternal. We know this because these two verses show how God created the world through His Word and His Spirit. We already discussed how the Spirit was working in verse 2, but we also see that God brings things into existence by just His Word. And remember, Jesus was referred to as the Word in John 1 through 3. So the reference to God, God the Father, creating the whole world through his word and his spirit shows how God the Spirit was working with God the Father, and also how God the Son was also working with God the Father to create the whole universe. They worked together. They weren't working separately, but they were working together with one goal in mind, to create the heavens and the earth so that humanity can live on the earth and thrive on the earth. We can also see from these verses that what God said to happen, happened. What God said to come to be, came to be. He said, "Let there be light," and there was light. This shows that God is actually the ruler over the universe. He has authority over the whole universe. What God says happens, the universe has to jump because God rules everything. He can make things happen. He has authority over it. We are now going to move on to verses 4 to 5, which reads, "And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning, the first day." So, on the first day, God created light. Notice how it said that God called the light good. He didn't call the darkness good. That is because darkness is the absence of light, and God is light. Darkness blinds us to God. We cannot see or reach God because we're in the dark. We can't see him. And when we are in the darkness and we can't reach God, that leads to death. That is why God provides light in the darkness. He is providing a way to get to him. And when we follow God's light to get to him and reach him and spend time with him, God can provide us with life, whereas darkness only leads to our death. For God to say that the light is good shows that God is the moral standard. He has the authority to say what is good versus what is bad, because God is all good. Remember, God is making the earth habitable for human beings for their good because he cares for them, showing that God is all good because he's caring for human beings who are a lot less significant than God is. But he cares for them no matter how insignificant human beings are. The light is good because it makes the earth habitable for human beings. God is caring for us human beings. And God created the light all in one day. We are now going to read verses 6 through 8. "And God said, Let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. And God made the expanse and separated the waters that were under the expanse from the waters that were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven, and there was evening and there was morning, the second day." God separating the waters is referring to God separating the waters from the land versus the waters from the sky, which the water from the sky probably refers to the clouds because the clouds are made of water and they hold water. We are now going to read verses 9 through 13. "And God said, Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the waters that were gathered together he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, Let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind on the earth. And it was so. The earth brought forth vegetation, plants yielding seed according to their own kind, and trees bearing fruit, in which is their seed, each according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the third day." On the third day, God works in two ways. He separates the water from the land, and then he creates plants. Instead of the waters being all chaotic all over the place, God puts them in one place, so there is now dry land. Notice also how God created the plants and grew the plants before he created the sun. This also shows that God does not have to rely on the things that we have to rely on. I also wanted to point out how God made the plants according to their kind. So my dad, he likes to garden. He plants all kinds of vegetables, tomatoes, cucumbers, bell peppers, all that kind of jazz. But if my dad plants a tomato plant, he doesn't expect a cucumber to come out of that plant. He knows to expect a tomato. And this is because God designed each plant with a specific DNA code. If a tomato plant has a specific DNA code to make a tomato, it's going to make a tomato. God made tomato plants with a specific DNA code to produce tomatoes. And I just wanted to point out, God spent so much time on plants who can't think or speak or anything to make sure they were who they were meant to be. He spent time designing this plant to who it's meant to be. If he did all this for a plant that can't talk or think, can you imagine how much time he spent caring for us and making us who we were meant to be? And we again see that God declares his work good. We are now going to read verses 14 through 19. And God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be signs and for seasons, and for days and for years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. And God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. So this verse should really stick out to you because here God finally created the sun, showing again how he created the plants before he created the sun. Meaning God doesn't rely on the things that we have to rely on. He doesn't need the sun to live while we need the sun to live. Now I also think verse 14 is very interesting because the Hebrew word for light in this verse is ma'or, which means light bearer. But the Hebrew word for light in verse 3 is just or, which just means light, plain light, nothing else that goes along with it. This shows how the sun is simply a light bearer. It can't produce light unless God provided it with the light. Whereas in verse 3, God made the light out of his own ability, his own power. He doesn't rely on anything like the sun relies on God to work and function. Now, these verses explain that God didn't only create the sun and the moon, but he also created the stars. Now, I thought this was really interesting that God added because God actually wrote this book through Moses. And if you don't know who Moses is, we'll get to him in Exodus. But during Moses' time, Israel was slaves in Egypt, and the Egyptians would worship the sun and the moon and the stars. But this verse shows that they were worshiping creation rather than the creator. Creation was never meant to be worshipped. Only God, the creator, was meant to be worshipped. These sun, moon, and stars couldn't do anything for the Egyptians. They should have instead pointed them to the creator of the universe, God, so he can be worshipped, where God actually loves human beings and cares for them and will help you, whereas the sun and the moon and the stars can't help you because they're nothing, they're creation. These verses show how God placed the expanse in the sky, meaning God thought it out where he was going to put the sun and where he was going to put the moon and everything like that, which shows how God carefully thought out how humans could live with the sun. Because if the earth was any closer or any further away from the sun, human life would not be supported. It would be impossible for us to live on the earth. So God was carefully thought it out so we could survive on the earth, which shows how impossible it would be for life to actually exist if the earth was not created by an intelligent being. We are now going to read verses 20 through 25. And God said, "Let the waters swarm with the swarms of living creatures, and let the birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the heavens." So God created the great sea creatures and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarm, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters of the sea, and let the birds multiply on the earth." And there was evening and there was morning, the fifth day. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds." And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. So on the fifth day and the sixth day, God created all the animals. And keep in mind that he also made it according to their kind, just like he did the plants. Notice how the first thing God did after making these animals is he blessed them. And he blessed them by giving them the ability to reproduce, because it is a blessing that you can reproduce. We are now going to read verse 26, which reads, "Then God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So here we have another reference to the Trinity, because God said, "Let us make man in our image," talking about how God is one being, three persons. Now, being made in the image of God is huge, because remember, God didn't create any other being that he made in his image except for us human beings, which means that we all have value. No matter your race, no matter your gender, you're made in the image of God. God awarded us by being made in his image, meaning we all have value because we all reflect the image of God. God loved human beings, creation, enough to make us in his image. An infinite, eternal God made human beings, finite creation, in his image. That's huge. Now, when I say that we are made in the image of God, that does not mean that we physically look like God, because we don't physically look like God. Because God is a spirit, whereas we are embodied beings. God is a supernatural being, whereas we are just embodied beings. When it says we are created in God's image, it shows that we have free will and we have the morals that God has and that we have spiritual capabilities, which means that we can have a relationship with God and that we can communicate with God. And I wanted to point out that God did not create human beings because he was lonely. God was not lonely. Remember, God is triune, meaning there was 3 persons in the Trinity. He had a relationship with the Trinity. He communicated with the Trinity. God created human beings because he desired it. He wanted it. He wanted to have a relationship with the human beings. He didn't need human beings. He created human beings out of the kindness of his heart because he loved us. So God creating human beings shows he loves us. And notice how he can love us because he had a relationship with the Trinity before he created human beings. God knew what love was, and God is love because the Trinity loved each other and they cared for one another, showing that God can also love us human beings. So God made human beings to take care of the earth and to rule over the animals. This is a huge responsibility God entrusted us with. He trusted us to take care of the earth that he created, that he ruled over. He trusted us just to do that, and he trusted us to rule over his animals. This shows that everything we do is a reflection of God. We reflect God through our actions. Ruling over the animals also show that we are more valued than the animals because we are made in God's image. We can have a relationship with God that no other part of creation can have. We are now going to move on to verse 27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So this verse clearly shows that both men and women are created in the image of God, meaning both have equal value. We are now going to move on to verse 28. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the heavens, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. The very first thing God did after creating human beings is he blessed them. This shows God's love for human beings and his goodness. And he blessed them by letting them have children. However, God told human beings what he didn't tell the animals. He told us to subdue it. He wants us to take care of it. God was very particular with how he made the earth so human beings could actually survive and live on it. That means we should take care of it. God put so much thought into it so it would take care of us that we should take care of this place that God gave us. We are now going to read verses 29 through 30. And God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed that is on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. This shows that God gave mankind and animals everything they needed to live. He gave them the plants to eat that they needed to live. Now, when I was researching it kind of blew my mind when I read this for the 100th time, but because this is something I never noticed before. God made man and animals to be herbivores. We were originally only supposed to eat plants, which is crazy to me. And this shows the original design for the world. Humans and animals are supposed to live together in peace and harmony. The animals were not meant to attack the other animals. And we didn't have to fear for our lives when we came across the lion. No animals attacked animals. No animals attacked us. We lived in harmony. This was God's original design for the world. We are now going to finish Genesis 1 by reading the last verse, which is verse 31. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the 6th day. Now, this verse is different from every other verse because instead of just describing the creation as good, he said it was very good. And the earth was very good at this point because there was no sin or evil or death. The earth was just perfect like it was meant to be. Now, before I end this video, I'm going to give you a way how you can apply Genesis 1 to your life. Instead of trying to be in control of your own life, submit it to God. Submit it to the God of creation, who is truly in control of everything, and let Him guide you on what to do with your life because He knows what He is doing because He is all knowing and all powerful. Another way you can apply Genesis 1 into your life is think more carefully about how you can take care of the earth that God gave us to live on. Maybe don't litter, maybe start recycling. Think of ways you can take care of this earth that God gave us to live on. Thank you for watching this video. Prayerfully, this helped you learn a little bit more about what Genesis 1 is about and how you can apply it to your life. Maybe I'll see you tomorrow when we go through Genesis 2. Bye.